Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I'm here with James Connell, who is the Chief E-commerce and Customer Experience Officer for Roots Canada, which is super exciting. James, thanks so much for being with me here today.
No, thanks for having me.
So, James, we're going to talk about managing social media communications and planning cycles. We're going to focus our topic of conversation around that. But before we get into anything like that, I'd just love to hear a little bit more about you. I've looked at and read about you online. Even the fact that you were a sailing coach long time ago is really interesting. So, what's been your career path, and what are you doing with Roots?
To be honest, this is all pretty much an accident. I was actually a sailing coach in the southern US and the Bahamas. I worked for Club Med for a winter, came back to Canada and realized, it was getting cold and needed some winter clothes. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll do this job that I thought was for 8 weeks at Roots. And in the meantime, do some freelance work on the side from a website business. What actually happened is I met the co-founders of Roots, met some incredible people, and almost 25 years later, I'm still with the company. When I when I started the company, I was the stock guy because that was the only job that they had that was available. So I just took it, thinking it was going to be a short-term thing, and ever since, I've been doing a lot of different things across the business, primarily focused around marketing and digital, but having a lot of
Wow,
fun along the way too.
that's remarkable. And so, you just working in a retail store then at the very beginning?
Absolutely. Yeah, I literally the first thing that I did when I started with the company was there was an accident where the trash can blew over outside the store on Bloor Street, and so my first task was to sweep the sidewalk outside the store.
So when they say like you got to start from the bottom, you're like, I was sweeping the store, like I started from the
Yeah,
bottom. That's
yeah.
brilliant. And did you study marketing?
I didn't. I actually studied design. So really, my background really is design and environmental design, aside from the sailing.
Yeah, well, that's fabulous. That's great. That's really interesting to hear where you come from. Now, working for this, I mean, when we talk about like great Canadian brands, I mean, living here in Vancouver and being, around the Olympics and seeing things like that. I mean, Roots is always at the center of like Canada and Roots are together. How has that been for you, being a Canadian and working for such an iconic brand?
Actually, it feels like a big privilege. I mean, there are very few companies where people would actually pay to put their logo on your chest. Oftentimes, it's an employee with a bad polo that you have to wear in a trade show. But we actually have hundreds of stores around the world where people pay to buy product with our logo on them,
Yeah.
and do it willingly. So it feels like it's a huge privilege as well as a responsibility. I mean, we have to live up to the customers' expectations as well as deliver great product every day.
That's brilliant. I love that. So can you tell us just a little bit about what your current role is?
Yeah, for sure. So, right now, I'm really responsible for anything that a customer touches when it comes to the brand and the brand experience outside of product. So, anything from a digital perspective, so website marketing, as well as e-commerce. I also am responsible for the call center and the interactions that you would have there through chat or phone.
Hmm.
And then also working with the creative folks and the marketing team.
Hmm. Fabulous. That's excellent. So if we dive into a little bit about social media and strategy, so why would you say it's important for us to plan for social media communications, maybe looking out into the next coming months, weeks, maybe years? How does that look like for you from your perspective and at Roots?
Well, I think for me, the strategy is really important. So without planning, you don't really know what your narrative is. You'd never, create a movie without having a script.
Yeah.
And this really isn't any different. Social media is entertainment. It's not really advertising
Mm.
if it's done well. And so as a result of that, you have to plan ahead, and you have to know where your story is going to go, as
Mm.
well as the fact that you want to be able to sync up your content across all the different platforms. So if you're sending an email or in our experience, creating a window display or launching a new product, you want to have a consistent message across all the different touch points so consumers can start to understand what you're trying to tell them.
So if I look at a marketing campaign maybe that you have done at Roots, I'm going to see consistency amongst, like you said, a storefront, social, and email blast, all this kind of stuff. So everything's going to be well integrated together.
If we're doing it well, yes. I mean, obviously, there's going to be moments where things don't quite make sense, but that's life. But in an ideal world, you would see a consistent theme and a consistent message across all the different touch points.
And so, what happens if a customer sees inconsistencies amongst maybe in an ad campaign? How does that negatively affect them?
I don't think it necessarily negatively impacts the customer, but they probably are sort of wondering, why does it not match with everything else that they're seeing?
Mm,
And it doesn't reinforce the larger message, whatever that might be. So, for example, if we're launching a campaign on sweatpants and all of a sudden randomly we insert something around, I don't know, coffee,
right.
that's not necessarily something you'd expect from Roots. At the same time, people would sort of question, why am I seeing this?
Mm, yeah, yeah. I think that's really interesting. And so, so you're. I guess what you're saying is you're trying to keep it simple for the customer to understand, so that they don't have to necessarily think twice about it.
Yeah, I mean, really, when it comes down to it, we're all bombarded with messages on a consistent basis. I mean, in you know,
Mm,
10, 30 seconds, I can scroll through a couple hundred posts on Instagram if I'm really dedicated at it. And when it comes down to it, when you're consuming that much content, you almost need to see the same message multiple times for it to
mhm.
actually be able to sink in. I mean, I keep hearing about how consumers have the same attention span right now as a goldfish. And so as a result of that, it's like, okay, we're busy and we're preoccupied with everything else. We probably have multiple screens going. So how do you create that message that is easily understood and absorbed from a consumer that probably isn't really that interested in what you've got to say?
Right. So, I mean, you kind of posed the question, how do you do this? And can I ask you that question? How do you do that? How do you engage with a consumer who, I mean, they're bombarded and they're confused and things are crazy in their life, etc.
No, well, I think it comes down to a value exchange. So if social media is done well, you're entertaining people. You're not advertising to them,
Mm,
and they're going to want to know what you're trying to tell them. So whether it's the fact that you're standing up for something that you truly believe in as a brand, or giving them information about the latest vacation destination, or impressing them with images of your abs. I don't know. It's all these different things that really consumers select who they follow for a variety of different personal reasons, and
right.
you just need to deliver on that promise on an ongoing basis.
Oh, that's great. And how much is story part of that?
I would say it's huge. I mean, when I go onto social, I follow different brands and different people because I sort of get sucked into the story
Right.
of what they're doing, what their lives are like, what products that they're selling. And I want to feel like I'm on the inside
Yeah.
as opposed to the outside. And I
Right.
really want to, get a sense of the fact that I'm seeing something that is authentic, real, and I can relate to.
Yeah.
And if someone doesn't deliver on that promise, I'm probably just as ruthless as every other consumer and just unfollow after a couple of posts.
Yeah, yeah, excellent. That's great. So when we look at strategic objectives, how can a marketer or a company take some of these objectives and actually turn them into actionable steps when it comes to social media communications?
Well, I think it comes down to, why you're on participating on social media in the first place,
Mm,
who your audience is that you're trying to attract, what platform that you're on, and what do you want to get out of the interaction? If really it's coming down to the fact that you want to engage with a lot of people, you're never going to engage with a lot of people without having a refined story or refined audience that you're trying to connect with.
yeah,
Because at a certain point, you want to connect with people's passion points, and that's when things start to go viral.
yeah. And so when we look at Roots, what is it that you feel has really landed with the consumers over the years that you've been doing this?
It's a good question. I think because the company really stands for a lot of different causes, whether it be LGBTQ, whether it's Canada, or just the fact that we feel it's important for you to be comfortable, and from that drive out confidence. I think those are aspects that are somewhat universal from a lot of people from Canada, frankly, and I think that's what brings a lot of interest from not only Canadians but also people outside our borders.
Right. Do you think that, or maybe how much is Canada's reputation globally uh, related or tied to the success of your brand for international or maybe even domestic sales?
Um, it really depends. I think, as much as Canada's reputation as a place of clean living, clean environment, people being able to stand up and be individuals, I think is important because it allows, as an individual, I can go out and do whatever I want to do in a pair of sweatpants and feel okay about it because I'm confident that I look good. But I would say that at the end of the day, if we didn't produce good quality product, then we probably wouldn't still be in business, regardless of the infinity with Canada anyway.
Yeah, yeah. And so, do you think if Canada's image starts to fade, the perspective of the global community starts to think, oh, Canadians maybe aren't so nice, or maybe they're a little more into, I don't know, pulling oil out of the ground than I originally thought. Is that going to affect you guys?
Um, I guess only the future would tell, and hopefully that doesn't actually happen. But I would say that overall, I mean, people love us for what we stand for that's more than just Canada. We have values that are somewhat linked to values that are, recognized as being similar to Canadians, whether it's inclusivity or just generally believing in creating a better community where you work or live.
Yeah.
And so as a result of that, there's somewhat universal feelings that we feel like we can connect with audiences around the world and have, frankly. We have more stores in Asia than we do in North America.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating. That's great. So, when we're looking at managing social media, maybe a campaign day to day, how do you deal with the management of social media? Do you at Roots use, dashboards and management systems? Do you have, very individualized teams of experts in specific roles? How does that work for you?
It comes down to a lot of different methods, actually. So we have a management platform that we use. And that sort of helps us with scheduling on a number of platforms, and also from a management perspective, really alerts us when people actually post,
Hmm.
either through AI, through logo recognition, as well as comments. But then there's also some platforms that don't have an integration that allows you to do that. So it's directly in the platform, responding in the platform, and that's probably on your cell phone. At sometimes late hours of the evening. So in order for us to make this scalable, really what it comes down to is the fact that we do have a dedicated team of people that support social, and we also have some people on our customer support team that also help us with customer support issues that come in
Hmm.
through the channel. But we try to integrate the development of the content with our creative team. So we have an amazing internal creative team that develops our campaigns as well as content for our website. And they are really linked in quite critically with our social team, so we can actually turn on a dime if we need to. But ultimately, everything is succinct and aligned, and as a result of that, everyone somewhat knows their role.
Yeah. So that's really interesting. So you mentioned like let's say image recognition. So if I post a picture wearing a Roots shirt and the logo is on there, you're suggesting that your technology that you employ allows you guys to know, oh, someone just posted themselves wearing a shirt.
Yeah, assuming that they post it on a publicly available
Right.
forum,
Right.
because obviously we can't get into where we don't
Sure.
want to,
Yeah.
but at the same time, yeah, it does. It actually helps us really understand what people are saying about our product sometimes, as well as alerts us to if there's an issue with quality, for example. We can actually, and someone's speaking negatively about that, we can reach out to that customer and find out what went wrong and
Yeah.
try to make it right.
Yeah. And do you have enough resources within your service team to actually be reaching out in those types of situations?
We do whenever we can. I mean, if it comes down to the point where someone surfaces something that's negative, we absolutely will reach out.
Right.
But what I would say is, due to the volume of content that goes out on a regular basis, it's not always
Yeah.
possible. But we
Yeah.
definitely attempt to do that.
Yeah. Well, that's fascinating. What are some useful social media management policies that you would employ at Roots?
I think first and foremost, our general rule is don't say anything that you wouldn't say on a stage.
Mm.
Because if you're on a stage, you generally know who your audience is,
Yeah.
and similar to whatever platform that you're on or who's following you, hopefully you have the same level of knowledge about them, and they what's acceptable to that audience or not. Ultimately, no bullying. So someone who makes a comment who's a bully immediately gets declined or blocked. We try to get, pardon me,
Would you delete that comment as well?
we would. If someone's commenting on some specific individual or making a comment that is completely inappropriate, we'll definitely remove it, because it's one, not fair to the individual that's being mentioned, and two, it doesn't really help our brand image if we're essentially propagating or sharing information that we don't agree with.
Yeah.
So we will say that it's been removed due to our anti-bullying policy,
Okay.
and just leave it there. And just so people know, if something was there and it's disappeared, why.
Yeah.
Aside from that, I think really just being willing to stand up to what you believe in, recognizing the fact that you need to be brand right. Um, Obviously, use spell check. Um, and then finally, just whenever we can, we have started a policy around signing off with your initials, because we have a number of individuals that support us on social.
Yeah.
When we have a consistent team, we try to do that more frequently. Just in the fact that if someone's having a dialogue with someone, they want to actually know who they're
Yeah.
talking to. So we actually have an individual. Her name is Erica, and she signs off with her initials ED. And so people have been sending Ed messages and postcards over the years, um, because Ed is the person that they know and the friend that they interact with.
That's great. Wow. And so do you get a sense that obviously through the interaction of the customer sending in postcards or whatever it is, that relationship with Ed, as they would say, is maybe as great or greater than their relationship with the brand itself?
I think so. I mean, especially for us, we're a brand that's made up of people.
Mm.
So, when we were originally marketing the company, it was Don Green and Michael Budman, our co-founders, their families and their lives that we talked about in our marketing.
Hmm.
Now, I think it's just different. They're not as involved with the organization, and so now it's a real connection, same way as you have a connection with a celebrity.
Right.
So I've had employees that work in our social media department, and they've had postcards and presents sent to them by different customers that they've interacted with online. So, I think creating a connection with an individual behind a brand is so much more powerful than just the brand itself.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. That's so cool to hear that because I think one of the challenges we see with social media is kind of the disconnect, right? The removal of the human aspect of a brand and trying to humanize a brand or put that personal touch in is really difficult. It's easy to do when you're in a store, but it's really difficult to do when you're a big company and yeah, you got a half a dozen social media managers commenting on stuff or whatever it is. I love that.
Uh, it's I think the more personable you can be and the more real, the more personality is going to come through. And as a result of that, you're actually more interesting as a brand.
Yeah, yeah, that's really good. James, thanks so much for being with me here today. That is such a, actually a really helpful way to end our conversation here. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure everyone watching this will have benefited greatly from the stories and the information that you've shared with us today. Thanks so much.
Thanks for the time. It was great having the conversation.